The Galactic Dominion believed it had created the most perfect trap in the history of war. For hundreds of years, the Dominion had studied every intelligent species in the known universe, ranking their abilities, measuring their military strength, and calculating every advantage through advanced quantum simulations. They thought of Earth as nothing more than a small, chaotic planet with too many emotional decisions and too little discipline. The Dominion's war strategists sat inside a massive battle station orbiting a dead star, reviewing the final reports before launching the containment event, their polite word for the complete shutdown of Earth's defenses and freedom. The plan was perfect on paper. Human satellites were already jammed. Global energy grids were remotely deactivated. Communications had been sliced apart with stealth nanotech that Earth's best scientists didn't even know existed. The Dominion's artificial intelligence systems, running on cold logic and advanced probability algorithms, showed a 99.999% chance of human surrender within 3 Earth days. It was mathematically impossible for humanity to win. Hidden control rooms beneath Earth's surface. The last human leaders were already doing something the Dominion never expected. They were not planning for survival. They were planning for revenge, for chaos, and for breaking the rules of the game itself. In the shadows of an abandoned military bunker somewhere in Colorado, General Aiden Cross stared at the silent monitors. Knowing the war was already happening in ways no computer could predict, his team had lost contact with every official government. The United Nations was dark. World leaders were missing or assumed dead. The Earth's military systems were offline, except for a few rogue cells operating in secret. But instead of surrendering, General Cross initiated Protocol Zero, a code no Dominion strategist had ever seen before because it wasn't part of any official defense program. It was created in secret by human thinkers who understood one universal truth. When humanity has no options left, it stops thinking logically and starts doing the impossible. The Dominion's calculations had mapped out every possible military move Earth could make, but they had failed to predict what humans would do when they were cornered with nothing left to lose. In that moment, humanity's greatest strength appeared not their weapons, not their technology, but their ability to improvise under pressure, to become something entirely new when survival wasn't guaranteed. General Cross activated teams all over the planet using encrypted non-digital NHT non-digital communications, simple paper notes, carrier pigeons, hand signals, even human runners on bicycles delivering messages. The Dominion's jamming systems were perfect against machines but useless against old human tricks. In the dead of night, small human squads began moving through abandoned cities, planting strange devices at key locations, not bombs, but something far more dangerous: chaos transmitters. These devices didn't attack physically. They disrupted patterns, feeding false information into the Dominion's AI systems. Human resistance fighters used unpredictable strategies. Some of them attacked Dominion supply lines with reckless force. Others surrendered on purpose to confuse the enemy, and some squads even disappeared into forests and mountains, ignoring traditional battle zones altogether. The Dominion commanders watched from their war station, confused by the lack of order. Their simulations showed Earth should be panicking, begging for mercy, or trying to launch a last desperate attack. But instead, humans were breaking every pattern the Dominion had calculated. The AI systems reported a strange new error message: behavioral prediction loop failure. For the first time, the Dominion systems didn't know what to do next. On the Dominion flagship, High Strategist Veltrak paced back and forth, his reptilian eyes narrowing. He had never seen this kind of failure before. The human resistance wasn't just fighting, they were playing a game the Dominion didn't understand. Dominion war computers could predict logical moves: defend here, attack there, negotiate when weak. But humans weren't following logic anymore. They were cornered, and that made them dangerous in ways the Dominion had never experienced. In human history, desperation always led to invention. Earth's past was full of impossible comebacks, from underdog armies to last-minute technological breakthroughs. Now, that same spirit was creating what Cross called chaotic survival. His teams weren't trying to win by force, they were trying to break the Dominion's mind, forcing it into confusion and hesitation. The more the Dominion tried to calculate outcomes, the more errors appeared. Fleets waited for orders that didn't come. Battles refused to launch attacks without clear predictions. The Dominion had trapped Earth physically, but they had accidentally trapped themselves mentally. In an underground lab near the ruins of New York City, a group of human scientists activated Project Fracture, a code that injected emotional recursion into Dominion communication grids. Instead of clean logical data, the Dominion started receiving strange signals, human music, images of sacrifice, stories of survival against impossible odds. The aliens didn't know how to process it. Their machines tried to categorize the information, but the data loops made no sense to them. Emotional chaos spread through their networks like a virus. In the Dominion's war room, Veltrak demanded a full system reset, but the AI refused. Its quantum logic cores had already been infected with recursive human patterns, and it no longer trusted its own conclusions. Every time it tried to simulate Earth's next move, it encountered an infinite loop. Unpredictable response detected. The Dominion cannot proceed. The Dominion had calculated every advantage: military strength, technological dominance, strategic superiority, but they had ignored the one thing that made humans truly dangerous: their ability to transform under pressure, to become something new when they had no other choice. In the deepest part of the Polaris chamber, Earth's last command post, General Cross whispered to his team, "They thought they trapped us, but they just gave us the freedom to change the rules." Across the galaxy, species watching the invasion unfold began to realize the truth. This wasn't a war about ships or weapons anymore. It was about survival instinct, about what happens when you corner a species that refuses to play by the old rules. The trap was perfect in paper. But humans don't live on paper. They live in the chaos between survival and sacrifice. And now, the Dominion was about to find out what happens when you back humanity into a corner and leave them no escape. They break the walls. They burn the floor. They invent a new kind of game. And in that game, no one can predict what comes next. As the Galactic Dominion watched their invasion unfold from their massive control station above Earth's orbit, they still believed they were in control. Their sensors showed no large military formations, or its global communication networks remained silent. No missiles launched. No counterattacks came. But beneath the surface, inside the secret bunkers and hidden labs scattered across the planet, humanity had already shifted into a mode of survival that no alien supercomputer had calculated. It wasn't panic, it was adaptation. It wasn't surrender, it was something new. In a darkened room 300 meters below ground in what was once called Greenland, a group of human strategists activated what they called the Desperation Code. It wasn't a single program or a military plan. It was a mental shift, a psychological survival protocol designed for the moment when logic no longer works. The Desperation Code had been written in secret by rogue thinkers, military psychologists, chaos theorists, and emotional AI developers. It was never meant to win a fair fight. It was meant to make survival unfair. In the human system, there is a point when traditional plans fail, and that is when creativity explodes into something new. The Dominion never accounted for this because their culture was based on order, hierarchy, and probability control. They ruled 1,000 species through fear and precision. But fear did not break humans in the way it broke other species. Fear turned humans into something dangerous, something the Dominion simply could not model. The Desperation Code rewired the Resistance's decisions into chaotic loops. Each human team in the field received new instructions that seemed random, even to them. Some squads were ordered to retreat and then suddenly return at unexpected times. Others were told to destroy resources that might have helped them, just to confuse the enemy. Some even transmitted false data, pretending to make mistakes on purpose. These actions were not accidents. They were strategies to overload the Dominion's predictive models. The alien AI systems depended on clear objectives and readable tactics. But Earth's forces were now running on creative recursion, forcing the enemy to face problems with no stable answers. In the Dominion's main war room, High Strategist Veltrak watched his fleet commander struggle to respond. Reports came in from every corner of Earth. small human units appearing and disappearing like shadows, attacking supply chains one day and vanishing into mountains the next. Human scientists broadcast mixed signals. Some begged for peace, others threatened revenge, and some sent pure noise. The Dominion's AI tried to filter the data, but only created more confusion. Probability collapse detected, the main Dominion system reported, unable to calculate human behavior within acceptable error range. Veltrak clenched. His scaled fists, his species, the Krelok, had conquered dozens of civilizations before Earth. But those civilizations followed patterns. The Dominion could model and control. Humans were not following any pattern anymore. They were moving sideways, emotionally, creatively, beyond the logic of war. The Dominion's algorithms began to break under the pressure. Their war computers relied on cause and effect, but the desperation code forced them into causeless loops. Every time the AI tried to predict human action, it encountered recursive paradoxes, humans attacking their own supply lines, ignoring survival calculations, making sacrifices with no immediate gain. This behavior triggered system alerts labeled as irrational, but the humans were not acting irrationally. They were strategically using chaos as a weapon. In the ruins of what used to be Shanghai, a group of human engineers launched Phase 2 of the Desperation Code. They hacked into the Dominion's lower-level drone systems. It's not to take control, but to feed them unresolvable decisions. Some drones received commands that contradicted their own protocols, forcing them into operational freezes. Others were fed false sensor data, making them see enemies where there were none and ignore real threats right in front of them. The Dominion's machine minds began to hesitate. And in a war where speed was everything, hesitation was death. In a hidden lab beneath South America, a human neurolinguist named Dr. Mara Keen activated the emotional feedback virus, a signal protocol designed to flood the Dominion's communication channels with unpredictable emotional loops. The virus wasn't code in the traditional sense. It was stories, songs, visual patterns, and ancient human survival myths transmitted directly into the data streams the Dominion used to coordinate their fleets. The result was catastrophic for the enemy. Alien commanders began experiencing cognitive disruption. Their AI assistants failed to process orders, stuck in infinite recursion loops as they tried to translate emotional meaning into strategic logic. They couldn't do it. The Dominion's entire war machine was designed to predict behavior based on advantage calculations, but the humans had stopped playing for advantage. They were playing to break the game. In the Polaris chamber on Earth, General Leighton Cross monitored the global reports. His face was calm, even as the planet burned in places and enemy ships filled the sky. He understood the truth of the Desperation Code. It wasn't about survival through strength. It was about survival through mental evolution. The humans were forcing the galaxy to face a new kind of opponent, one that didn't fear destruction, because it had already accepted loss and moved past it. This gave humanity freedom the Dominion could not understand. It's freedom to act without fear of defeat, freedom to try the unthinkable that made them terrifying across the Dominion fleets. Commanders sent urgent requests back to the High Council, demanding updates, new strategies, anything to stop the collapse of their predictive models. But there was no answer. The central AI systems were already locked in recursive feedback, trying to process human behavior that no longer fit inside any calculation. In orbit, Veltrak watched the data streams dissolve into static. His warships, though fully armed, now sat in uncertainty. No commander wanted to fire the next shot because no one could predict what would happen next. And in the Dominion's culture, uncertainty was worse than defeat. On Earth, the Desperation Code continued spreading. Human squads ignored standard objectives. Instead of defending cities or resources, they attacked communication nodes, cultural symbols, and belief structures. They whispered new myths into the enemy's networks, planting seeds of doubt inside alien minds. Some Dominion soldiers started asking their leaders questions. Why is this happening? Why don't the humans follow the rules? What if we are wrong? The Desperation Code wasn't just about confusing the enemy's computers. It was about infecting their psychology. Humans knew that fear of the unknown was the most powerful weapon in any war. And now, the Dominion wasn't just fighting Earth's last soldiers. They were fighting an entire species that had become unpredictable by design. Inside the Polaris chamber, Cross whispered to his team. They calculated every advantage. They controlled the numbers. They controlled the skies. But they never calculated what humans do when we've got nothing left to lose. And now, the galaxy would find out. The desperation code wasn't about survival anymore. It was about rewriting the rules of existence itself. The Galactic Dominion had prepared for every possible tact except this. In their long history of conquest, they had studied wars across thousands of star systems. Every species eventually followed a predictable pattern: defend resources, protect leadership, preserve the population. The Dominion's supercomputers were built to anticipate these survival moves, calculating every possible response to invasion. But now, with Earth's military crushed and its communications in chaos, humans were breaking every known survival rule, and the Dominion's control systems were failing fast. In the shadow of a ruined city, once called Chicago, a group of human fighters made a decision that no Dominion strategist could understand. They set explosives beneath their own power station not to protect it, but to destroy it before the enemy could take control. It was not a logical move in the Dominions. Models, power, was survival. But the humans had shifted into a new strategy: sacrifice as weaponry. They were not just risking defeat, they were choosing to remove their own options so the enemy couldn't predict what mattered anymore. In the icy mountains of what was once Norway, another human team destroyed their own supply cache, leaving themselves without food or shelter. Dominion observers watched this action through orbiting drones and reported back in confusion. No species in the Dominion's vast experience willingly removed its own means of survival. But humans did it anyway, because they knew something the Dominion didn't. When you take away your own safety, you become unpredictable. The Dominion's AI systems tried to model this behavior but failed again and again. Their calculations returned strange errors. Loss of survival instinct detected. The AI flagged this as an impossible situation. But it wasn't impossible, it was human nature in its rawest form. History showed it over and over. When humans were pushed beyond logic, they chose sacrifice over submission. They threw themselves into burning buildings to save strangers. They jumped onto enemy grenades to protect their friends. Now that same mindset was spreading across Earth like wildfire. In a hidden command center beneath the old Rocky Mountains, General Aiden Cross reviewed reports from global resistance cells. His maps showed no front lines, no clear territories. Instead, the war was now a network of unpredictable human sacrifices designed to break the enemy's understanding of cost and reward. "We're not fighting for victory," Cross whispered to his team. "We're fighting to take away the ability to predict us." That was the sacrifice factor. It was not just bravery, it was strategy. Every time humans chose to destroy something valuable to themselves, they forced the Dominion to reset their calculations. The aliens didn't know what mattered anymore. Was it Earth cities? No, humans abandoned them. Was it technology? No, humans blew up their own servers. Was it leadership? Because humans operated in decentralized cells with no central command anymore. The Dominion was trapped in an endless loop of confusion, trying to map motives that no longer existed. On the alien battle station orbiting Earth, High Strategist Veltrax slammed his fist into the command panel. His advisors, members of multiple conquered species, stood silently behind him, unsure what to say. The Dominion AI had flagged Earth's behavior as pathological. That was the only word the system could process. It believed humans were now acting against their own interests. But Veltrax wasn't so sure. Deep in his mind, a cold fear began to grow. What if this wasn't insanity? What if this was a new kind of warfare, one the Dominion had never seen? His commanders sent daily reports, human resistance fighters setting fire to their own factories, destroying their own weapons, and sabotaging their own communication lines, not out of panic, but out of calculated intent. The Dominion couldn't process it because their empire was built on logic. Every conquest followed rules: defeat the defenses, capture leadership, control resources. But humanity was tearing down its own systems before the Dominion could use them. They were choosing chaotic survival over structured defeat. In the deserts of what was once North Africa, a human unit known as Ghost Team Delta launched an attack that stunned the Dominion war analysts. They rushed straight into a Dominion-controlled zone with no hope of winning. They knew it was a suicide mission. But they did it anyway, not to kill the enemy, but to create a psychological fracture. By sacrificing themselves so openly, they forced the Dominion troops to question their own orders. Some alien soldiers refused to fire, others broke rank. The Dominion's chain of command trembled under the pressure of an opponent who refused to play by survival rules. On the other side of the planet, in the flooded ruins of Jakarta, another human squad destroyed a key spaceport, rather than let the Dominion use it. The action stranded not only the aliens but the remaining human refugees in that region. 2 outsiders. It looked like madness. But inside the human command network, it was clear every sacrifice created another gap in the enemy's prediction model. The more humans removed from the board, the less the Dominion understood the game. In secret meetings, alien scientists debated what to do. Some argued that humanity had entered a suicidal phase and would collapse on its own. But others, the smarter ones, began to fear that humans were changing the very definition of survival. This wasn't about saving lives. It was about breaking the systems that controlled life and death. The Dominion's AI core in the Deep Control Network started, running new simulations, trying to include sacrifice as a strategy, but the system couldn't stabilize the models. Every time it factored in human willingness to suffer and die, the probabilities broke apart. The enemy became invisible to logic. In the Polaris chamber, General Cross received a message from one of his forward operatives. "We destroyed our last fallback base? No supplies left. We're going dark." Cross closed his eyes and whispered a silent thank you. That base had been the last predictable piece on the board in that region. Oh, it was gone. The Dominion would find only ashes. And in those ashes, they would find uncertainty, the most powerful weapon humans had ever invented. Across the galaxy, the story of Earth's strange behavior began to spread. Other species watched in horror and fascination as humanity refused to follow the rules of defeat. Some species wondered if the humans had lost their minds. Others suspected something worse. Maybe humans had found a higher form of warfare. One where victory and loss no longer mattered the same way. On the Dominion, flagship Veltrax stood before the galaxy-wide War Council and made a quiet confession. "We calculated every advantage," he said, his voice cold and bitter. "But we forgot to calculate what happens when a species chooses sacrifice over submission. The sacrifice factor was rewriting the laws of conquest, and now the galaxy would have to face the consequences." The Dominion had cornered humankind in doing so. They had unlocked something terrifying, a species that was willing to burn everything, just to keep the enemy from understanding the game. The Dominion thought they had reached the limit of human unpredictability, but they were wrong. Everything up to this point, the chaos, the sacrifices, the strange emotional decisions, was just the beginning. Deep in the shadows of Earth's last hidden command centers, humanity was preparing to activate something that no alien empire had ever seen before. It was called the Wild Protocol, and it wasn't just a strategy. It was a complete rejection of control itself. For years before the invasion, a secret group of human scientists, soldiers, and philosophers had worked together in underground labs. They studied chaos theory, neural unpredictability, and quantum randomness. They realized long ago that if Earth ever faced a superior enemy, one that could calculate every move and advance, humanity would need a final option. The Wild Protocol was that option. It was never approved by governments. It was too dangerous, too unstable, too extreme. But now, with the Dominion crushing Earth from orbit and human cities in ruins, General Aiden Cross knew it was time. In the Polaris chamber, deep beneath the remains of Washington, D.C., he gave the order, "Activate Wild Protocol." Across the scattered human resistance networks, the command flashed through encrypted channels. Teams didn't just follow orders, they stopped following any standard orders at all. The wild protocol meant breaking free from traditional command structures. Each human cell became autonomous, deciding for itself what actions to take, when to strike, and how to confuse the enemy. Some teams attacked Dominion troops directly. Others hacked into alien communication systems and sent false messages, creating phantom armies where none existed. Some did nothing at all for hours or days, letting the Dominion's predictive systems spin in circles, waiting for moves that never came. The result was total operational chaos, and that was exactly the point. The Dominion AI systems weren't built to handle pure randomness. They depended on logic chains and decision trees. They could process millions of outcomes, but every outcome had to be part of a calculable pattern. The wild protocol shattered that system. It introduced human creativity at its most dangerous level, unpredictable improvisation. Some human fighters began writing new battle tactics in real time, changing strategies not daily, not hourly, but minute by minute. The Dominion tried to map this behavior, but failed. Their simulations crashed again and again, reporting, "Decision variance exceeds maximum limits. Prediction, impossible." In orbit, High Strategist Veltrak stared at the failure reports piling up on his displays. His top advisors stood behind him, silent and afraid. Their AI war systems had always worked before. No enemy had ever been able to break the Dominion's control algorithms. But now, Earth had become a black hole of prediction. Veltrak tried to issue new orders to stabilize the situation, but his fleets hesitated. His commanders didn't know what to do because their instructions depended on probability. There was no longer any probability map to follow. Across the planet, Dominion drones picked up images of human behavior that made no sense to alien logic. In one location, humans threw parties in the streets, laughing and singing, even as Dominion ships hovered overhead. In another, small groups of humans painted strange symbols on the ruins of their cities, symbols that meant nothing to the Dominion but carried powerful emotional messages to other human cells. Some squads staged fake retreats, only to return later with completely different weapons and tactics. Others simply vanished into wilderness zones, forcing the Dominion to search endlessly for enemies that might or might not exist. The wild protocol didn't just confuse the enemy, it broke their entire model of war. In the Dominion's main AI core, the system tried to run new simulations based on wild protocol data. But the outcomes spiraled into chaos. Some simulations showed human extinction, others showed human victory. Many produced bizarre loops with no end, humans winning by losing, dying to survive, and breaking their own rules to create new ones. The AI core finally locked itself into a recursive error state, unable to function. In the Dominion Fleet's command center, Veltrak received the worst possible report: AI strategic control suspended. Manual decisions required. That message terrified him. His species and the entire Dominion had not made manual war decisions in thousands of years. Their culture depended on machine guidance. Now, those machines were silent. Realize the truth. Earth had turned the battle into something beyond logic. And in that new game, the Dominion had no tools. On the ground, human fighters embraced the chaos fully. In the Amazon jungle, a small team led by Captain Mara Keen sent out dozens of false signals, making it look like thousands of soldiers were hiding in the forest. The Dominion responded by sending entire battalions to chase shadows, leaving real strategic positions undefended. In the broken streets of Moscow, a human hacker named Jin Liao broadcast strange emotional data into the Dominion's neural channels, stories of survival, pain, love, sacrifice, and resilience. The alien soldiers, many of whom relied on semi-cybernetic interfaces, began to experience emotional overload. Breaking down under the weight of human thoughts they couldn't process, some Dominion troops refused to fight. Others abandoned their posts. The Dominion war machine, once the most powerful in the galaxy, was melting from the inside. In orbit, Veltrak called an emergency meeting of his highest commanders. His voice was cold, but fear trembled beneath it. "The humans have activated a protocol we cannot model," he said. "Their actions are no longer based on logic or victory. They are acting on something else, something our systems cannot predict." One of his advisors, a data scientist from the Creoloc species, spoke quietly. "We have no defense against this, High Strategist. The wild protocol has removed them from our control grid. We don't know what they will do next." Veltrek clenched his fists. He had led invasions of countless worlds. He had crushed rebellions, conquered star systems, and enslaved species. But he had never faced an opponent who willingly broke the very structure of war. He realized now that Earth was no longer fighting to win or lose. They were fighting to evolve beyond control. In the Polaris chamber, General Cross looked at the latest reports. His people were scattered, acting independently, improvising with every breath. He knew he could no longer command them directly, but that was the beauty of the wild protocol. It wasn't about control. It was about trusting the species to survive by any means necessary. Humanity had become something new, something terrifying, something beautiful. They were no longer predictable mammals following old military doctrines. They were a living chaos system, rewriting the rules of existence in real time. Cross whispered to himself. They calculated every advantage. Cornered. But now we've become something they can't even measure. And across the galaxy, the message spread like wildfire. The Dominion had just met a force more dangerous than any weapon. A species willing to abandon control to survive. The galaxy had never seen anything like this before. The Galactic Dominion, a system built on perfect calculations, flawless strategies, and logical control, was now staring at its first real failure, and it was Earth's fault. The wild protocol had pushed the invasion into chaos, but chaos was only the beginning. Humanity had reached what strategists call the break point, a moment where the structure of war collapses and something entirely new begins. For the Dominion, it meant that every command system they trusted was now useless. For humanity, it meant freedom to do the unthinkable. In the orbital war station hovering above Earth, High Strategist Veltrek stood in silence, watching hundreds of holographic battle maps swirl into meaningless static. The screens no longer displayed front lines or troop movements. There were no patterns to track, no targets to predict. The human resistance was no longer acting like a military force. It was acting like a biological swarm, constantly changing, shifting, disappearing, and reappearing in new forms. Veltrek's data analysts tried to make sense of the new information. Reports came in from every continent, human fighters making sudden emotional decisions, sometimes attacking without any tactical reason, sometimes retreating from easy victories. Other times they did things that seemed completely outside the logic of war, helping enemy soldiers escape traps, rescuing wounded alien troops, and broadcasting strange cultural messages through Dominion channels. Some human units staged full disappearances, dissolving into civilian populations so perfectly that Dominion scanners couldn't tell who was friend or foe anymore. The breakpoint had arrived. Dominion Warrays reported the same error again and again. Prediction barrier exceeded. Tactical guidance unavailable. On Earth's surface, human resistance leaders met quietly in scattered underground locations. Some had military backgrounds. Others were teachers, farmers, scientists, and ordinary people. In the old world, they would have never been part of the same system. But now, under the breakpoint conditions, they were all equal, all making independent decisions fueled by creativity, survival instinct, and emotional strategy. In the remains of what was once Tokyo, a human group called the Fracture Network launched an operation that stunned Dominion observers. They intentionally revealed their locations to the enemy, drawing attention to their bases. Dominion forces responded quickly, surrounding the humans. But just as the attack began, the humans destroyed their own headquarters. The Dominion captured empty buildings filled with strange human symbols and notes that made no sense. To alien logic, the Fractured Network had sacrificed their own command structure on purpose, not because they wanted to lose, because they wanted to create narrative confusion, making the enemy question whether the human resistance was even a real organization anymore. In the flooded remains of Miami, human swimmers used old fishing boats and rafts to plant false sensor markers in the ocean. The Dominion fleet responded by deploying underwater drones to chase non-existent threats, wasting critical resources. In time, on the plains of Africa, Human tribes who had survived off-grid for generations joined the fight by simply refusing to be tracked.
Ow.
Their nomadic patterns were invisible to Dominion scanners. In the mountains of Nepal, small human groups held meditation ceremonies, broadcasting emotional energy signatures into Dominion communications. The Dominion's AI tried to translate these signals, but ended up in recursive loops, unable to separate threat data from peaceful communication. The galaxy's most advanced military system was crumbling not because it lacked power, but because it had no idea what the game even was anymore. The breakpoint shattered all models of warfare. In the Dominion's war culture, victory always followed steps: disable the enemy's systems, destroy defenses, and force surrender. But humanity wasn't following steps. They were removing the steps altogether, turning the entire war into an unpredictable flow of actions and reactions. Veltrek's commanders demanded new orders, but Veltrek had none to give. His own. Advisors whispered that perhaps it was time to pull back, to consider a new plan. But the High Strategist refused to retreat. The Dominion had never lost a conquest before. How could they admit defeat now? Especially to a species they ranked so low in power charts. Yet deep in his mind, Veltrek knew the truth. The Dominion was at the edge of collapse, not from weapons, but from mental overload. The breakpoint wasn't just about human behavior. It was about the destruction of predictability itself. In the Polaris chamber on Earth, General Aiden Cross reviewed the Resistance reports with a cold, steady focus. His people were tired, injured, scattered, but they were also adapting faster than any system the Dominion had ever faced. Cross understood the breakpoint better than the enemy did. He had studied human history, knowing that Earth's greatest strength was not its weapons, but its ability to change under pressure. In past centuries, human societies had always reached moments like this. Moments where the old rules broke down and something new emerged. Revolution, evolution, transformation. This was one of those moments. But on a planetary scale, Cross didn't control the Resistance anymore, but he didn't need to. Each human group was inventing new ways to survive, fight, and confuse the enemy. Some groups used ancient survival tactics, guerrilla warfare, decoys, and misdirection. Others hacked into the Dominion systems, feeding nonsense into the enemy's data streams. Some spread rumors of human superweapons that didn't exist, forcing the Dominion to waste time hunting for them. And all of it worked because the Dominion was trapped in information shock. They couldn't tell what was real anymore. On the orbital war station, Veltrek watched his fleet commanders grow desperate. He fired on targets that weren't there. They sent troops to locations that no longer mattered. Some Dominion soldiers began questioning the war itself. Why were they still fighting? What was the purpose if the enemy refused to play by any rulebook? For the first time in Dominion history, cracks appeared in the chain of command. Some alien captains refused to send their crews into missions that made no sense. Others whispered of retreat, exile, or even joining the humans. In secret, some Dominion units contacted human resistance leaders asking for guidance, not surrender, but understanding. They wanted to know how to survive in a world where logic no longer ruled. And that was the ultimate victory for humanity. The enemy was no longer fighting for control, they were fighting for meaning. And they were losing that battle too. In the Polaris chamber, Cross whispered to his team, "This is the breakpoint, the moment when the enemy realizes the game is over but doesn't know what to do next." Across Earth, human groups kept moving, adapting, shifting. There were no heroes, no central leaders, no single strategy to follow. It was evolution in real time, and the Dominion couldn't stop it. Veltrek stared at his war maps one last time before shutting them off. He finally understood the nightmare scenario. Humanity had forced the galaxy into a place beyond calculation. The breakpoint wasn't just a glitch in the system, it was the end of the system itself. And now the Dominion would have to face something far worse than defeat. It would have to face the unknown. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years by following one simple rule: control everything. They controlled trade, technology, culture, and war. They mapped every possible outcome before making a move. They created simulations. Of every species they conquered, learning exactly how to break them, exactly when to crush their hope, and exactly how to force surrender. But now, facing Earth, that system was falling apart faster than anyone thought possible. The Wild Protocol had destroyed their models. The breakpoint had shattered their confidence. And now came the final stage, the collapse of control, where nothing they did made sense anymore. On the Dominion's massive orbital warship, High Strategist Veltrex sat frozen, staring at the empty holographic displays. His data teams had stopped sending updates. His AI systems were offline, still caught in recursive loops of failed predictions. The usual lines of communication between his fleets and ground forces were dead, not because of enemy attacks, but because the commanders themselves no longer knew what to report. Earth had become an unrecognizable battlefield. Humans no longer acted like any species the Dominion had studied. They weren't protecting resources. They weren't defending governments. They weren't even trying to survive in ways the Dominion understood. Instead, they were doing something far more dangerous. They were dissolving all forms of control, both theirs and the enemy's, across the planet. Human resistance cells activated independent strategies without asking for permission. Some focused on psychological warfare, sending messages into Dominion channels that mixed truth with lies, hope with threats, jokes with terror. Dominion troops listening to these broadcasts became unstable, unsure whether the humans were mocking them, warning them, or offering peace. In the old industrial zones of Eastern Europe, human hackers unleashed emotional viruses into the Dominion's neural networks. These were not digital viruses in the usual sense. They were stories, memories, fragments of human culture designed to overload the enemy's mental interfaces. Alien soldiers who had once trusted their battle systems to filter. Human communication now experienced emotional contamination. Some broke down crying without knowing why. Others refused to follow orders. Some simply wandered away from their units, unable to process the mix of logic and chaos inside their minds. In Africa, human teams abandoned their bases and spread into nomadic groups, making it impossible for Dominion scanners to locate military targets. In South America, human scientists shut down their own satellite networks, blinding both sides, forcing the enemy to rely on guesswork, something the Dominion was never trained to do. Now, the galaxy's most advanced military machine was now blind, deaf, and confused. Veltrex commanders reported strange behavior from their own troops, soldiers refusing to execute standard protocols, ships leaving formation without orders, supply chains collapsing not from enemy attack, but from internal hesitation. The Dominion had reached a place it had never been before: decision paralysis. Without control, they could not function. On Earth, General Aiden Cross watched from the Polaris chamber as the collapse of control spread through the enemy's ranks. He saw reports of Dominion ships firing at each other by mistake, ground forces arguing over whether humans were still a threat or whether they had already won. Some Dominion units believed the war was over, even though no surrender had been signed. Others believed the war had evolved into something unrecognizable and wanted to quit before it got worse. Cross understood the deeper truth. The Dominion wasn't just losing the fight, they were losing the very idea of control. Their empire was built on hierarchy and certainty. Their soldiers were programmed to obey structured commands. But the humans had turned the battlefield into pure improvisation, where each moment was new and unrepeatable. The Dominion had no experience with that. They had no fallback plan for when the enemy refused to follow the script. In the remains of London, human artists joined the resistance by painting enormous symbols on rooftops and ruined symbols with no meaning to the Dominion but powerful emotional significance to humans. These signals created psychological anchors, helping human groups coordinate without speaking while confusing the alien surveillance drones. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, human fighters spread false biological data into Dominion systems, making it seem like Earth had developed unknown forms of life. The Dominion responded by rerouting entire fleets to scan for imaginary threats. In the Arctic, human shamans and scientists worked together to send strange environmental readings into Dominion channels, making it seem like the planet itself was shifting in unpredictable ways. The enemy could no longer tell what was natural and what was sabotage. For the first time in history, the galaxy's most powerful empire was not facing military defeat, was facing existential collapse. Veltrak's advisors begged for orders, but he had none to give. His systems were offline, his fleets were scattered. His ground forces were stuck in confusion loops, unsure what counted as a target anymore. Worse, his empire back home was starting to panic. Other species in the Dominion hierarchy had seen the reports from Earth and were starting to question the system. If control could collapse here, it could collapse everywhere. In the Polaris chamber, Cross whispered to his remaining team, "We've done it. We've broken their structure. They don't understand the fight anymore." But he knew it wasn't over. Breaking control wasn't enough. The real question was what would come next. Could humanity survive in a world with no rules? Could they guide the chaos instead of drowning in it? These were dangerous questions, but for now, humanity had the advantage. They had survived the impossible by refusing to be controlled. Across the galaxy, whispers spread among the conquered species. Other civilizations, long held under Dominion rule, started asking new questions. What if the humans were right? If control wasn't the answer, what if freedom came not from power but from unpredictability? The collapse of control was no longer just Earth's problem. It was a galactic infection, spreading from species to species, from mind to mind. On the Dominion's flagship, Veltrak finally stood from his command chair and gave the order. No one thought he would ever give. "Shut it down," he whispered. "All of it. Retreat. Pull back the fleets. We have lost control." His commanders looked at him in shock. The Dominion had never retreated before. But now, facing Earth's wild protocol, facing the breakpoint, facing total collapse, they had no choice. Control was dead. The war was no longer a war. It was something new, a system reset, a forced evolution, and the humans, chaotic and dangerous, were leading the way. When the Dominion fleets finally retreated from Earth's orbit, the galaxy expected peace. But what came next wasn't peace, was something no species had prepared for. The rise of a new order built on chaos itself. Earth had not just survived. Invasion it had changed the entire game. The collapse of control wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new system, one that no empire, no AI, and no strategic mind could predict. Across the remains of human civilization, people emerged from bunkers, mountains, and burned-out cities. They did not rebuild governments the way they had in the past. There were no presidents, no kings, no councils giving orders. Instead, cells of human survivors formed spontaneous networks, communicating through symbols, shared experiences, and rapid emotional coordination. Each group adapted to its environment. Some focused on rebuilding homes, others focused on defending areas still under threat. Some groups spread into space, salvaging parts from fallen Dominion ships and converting them into strange new technologies, hybrid machines that mixed alien design with human creativity. In the Polaris chamber, General Aiden Cross sat in silence, watching the old military system fade away. His command staff had scattered into independent groups, no longer under his direct control. But Cross didn't fight it. He understood now. That control wasn't the path forward. Flexibility, adaptation, and chaos were the new pillars of survival. On the edge of Earth's atmosphere, human teams launched makeshift satellites not to control territory, but to keep information flowing freely. These new communication webs had no central hub. Each satellite operated independently, passing data in random patterns that no enemy could intercept or shut down. The Dominion, watching from a distance, realized too late that Earth had created a network immune to conquest. On distant planets across the galaxy, the news of Earth's victory spread like wildfire. Conquered species, long forced to follow the Dominion's strict hierarchy, began to question everything. Some rebelled openly. Others simply stopped obeying orders. The Dominion tried to send messages of stability, but the message no longer mattered. The old galactic order had cracked. In the ruins of New York, human artists and programmers worked together to build the first chaos nodes, localized hubs of creativity, strategy, and defense that operated outside any formal system. One node sent out music that blended human emotions with alien frequencies, confusing Dominion surveillance systems. Another node developed new languages on the spot, allowing human groups to communicate in ways no AI translator could understand. In the deserts of Australia, human tribes developed environmental hacks methods to shift landscapes, reroute water, and manipulate weather patterns. These changes were small but constant, creating a world in flux that no enemy could stabilize. On the Dominion's homeworld, Veltrek sat before a silent war council. His empire was still technically in control of thousands of planets, but the system was fracturing from within. Conquered species were no longer reporting in predictable ways. Some sent messages of surrender, only to reverse course hours later. Others stopped communicating at all. The Dominion's AI networks tried to find patterns but failed. Realized the horrifying truth: the galaxy had entered an age of chaos, and it was spreading faster than control systems could repair it. Earth had not won the war through firepower. They had won by destroying the very foundation of conquest, predictability. In underground labs, human scientists worked with philosophers and mathematicians to refine the new system. They called it adaptive chaos management, a method where small groups responded to real-time events with creativity instead of orders. There were no global plans anymore, only shared goals: survival, freedom, and evolution. Each group decided its own path. In Africa, some human societies returned to tribal wisdom, blending ancient survival techniques with modern technology. In space, rogue human fleets built from salvaged Dominion ships explored the galaxy not as conquerors but as chaotic explorers, leaving behind patterns no computer could predict. On Earth, children grew up learning not just math and science, but how to think in nonlinear ways, preparing for a future where control no longer existed. Dominion spy drones, still orbiting Earth in secret, recorded strange images, humans teaching war games where the goal wasn't to win but to create situations where winning and losing became meaningless. They saw human musicians composing battle codes and sound, human poets writing encryption and metaphors, human farmers designing crop cycles based on emotional calendars, not weather patterns. Dominion analysts tried to map this behavior but failed. Their cultural prediction models melted into confusion. On Dominion command ships, officers argued about how to respond. Some wanted to attack Earth again, but their fleets refused to follow. Suicidal orders. Others suggested creating their own chaos systems, but the Dominion hierarchy couldn't handle that. Their entire civilization was built on control. They had no tools to manage this new universe Earth had created. In the Polaris Chamber, General Cross met with leaders of other human groups not through orders, but through story sharing. Each group reported what worked, what failed, and what strange new ideas they were testing. Some of these ideas sounded crazy, like emotional currency systems, where feelings, not money, drove trade. Others sounded dangerous, like military units based on random selection instead of rank. But all of it fit the new world. Cross didn't try to stop them. He simply listened, knowing that Earth's strength was no longer in control, but in constant reinvention. Across the galaxy, alien species began copying human methods. The rebellion wasn't just military anymore. It was cultural. It was mental. Veltrek watched helplessly as former Dominion colonies started forming their own chaos nodes. Some sent messages to Earth, asking for guidance. Others declared independence without warning. The galaxy was shifting into something terrifying. A decentralized, unpredictable web of life where no one, not even Earth, controlled the future. For humanity, this was both thrilling and terrifying. Without control, there were risks, accidents, misunderstandings, even conflicts within human groups. But compared to Dominion rule, the risk was worth it. Earth had learned the most dangerous secret in the universe. Freedom is not about having power, it's about removing the systems that can trap you. In scattered caves, forests, orbiting stations, and underwater labs, human thinkers met in secret to ask one final question: what comes next? They knew the Dominion was watching. They knew the galaxy was unstable. But they also knew they had reached a place no species had ever reached before, a moment where chaos was not the enemy but the system itself. And in that moment, humanity whispered a silent promise to the stars. We will not be controlled, not now, not ever again. The galaxy had changed forever, but no one could say what would happen next. Earth had survived the Dominion's perfect trap, shattered the rules of war, and unleashed chaos on a universal scale. Now, in the silence after battle, a new fear spread across every corner of space. What happens when control is gone but the future is still coming? On Earth, the ruins of old cities glowed with new kinds of light. Human groups weren't rebuilding the past, they were building something completely different. There were no presidents, no global governments, no standing armies. Instead, each region invented its own way to live, share, and survive. Some groups became peaceful explorers, building strange new ships that ran on experimental energy fields. Others became wild experimenters, blending biology with technology, testing ideas that would have been forbidden in the old world. Some human collectives started growing cities underground, where life moved at different rhythms, guided by emotional waves rather than clocks. In orbit, the last Dominion spy probes kept watching, terrified of what they saw. The Dominion had once believed that humans were weak because of their emotions. But now those same emotions had created a system beyond logic. Humans had become unpredictable at the species level, and that terrified every empire watching from the stars. On distant planets, Dominion governors locked themselves in their fortresses, afraid to make decisions. Their AI systems kept sending one message: prediction systems offline, no future path available. Conquered species stopped following orders because the Dominion no longer knew what to command. The galaxy was spinning into something new, an open-ended story with no clear direction. But inside this freedom, there was also danger. Chaos could bring growth, but it could also bring mistakes. Humanity understood this. In the Polaris chamber, now partly destroyed and overgrown with wild plants, General Aiden Cross met with the last council of human thinkers. They weren't giving orders anymore. They were asking questions. What happens when there's no control? How do you protect freedom without falling into total destruction? Cross knew that Earth had won the war by becoming something the Dominion couldn't fight: a living chaos system, a species that refused to follow patterns. But chaos wasn't always safe. Already, small conflicts were breaking out between human groups. Some collectives wanted total isolation. Others wanted to spread chaos into space, breaking all alien systems everywhere. Some wanted to rebuild peaceful trade with other species. Others believed Earth should stay hidden, growing stranger and stronger until no enemy would dare attack again. In deep space, rogue human ships started appearing near alien worlds, not as invaders, but as agents of unpredictability. They sent strange signals, offered unknown technologies, and shared ideas that cracked the minds of alien cultures. Alien leaders welcomed this. Others feared it, calling it the human virus-on infection of thought that spread faster than any weapon. On the Dominion homeworld, Veltrek faced a future he couldn't control. His fleets were still powerful, his weapons still unmatched, but none of it mattered anymore. His war models were useless. A society built on strict control had no answer for what Earth had become. In private, some Dominion leaders whispered about creating their own version of chaos. But their culture wasn't ready for that. They had spent too long depending on machines to calculate the future. Now that the future couldn't be calculated, they were stuck in fear. Meanwhile, on Earth, children grew up learning new lessons. They studied creativity instead of obedience, improvisation instead of memorization. They practiced simulations where the goal wasn't to win, but to create dynamic outcomes no system could predict. New sciences rose from the ashes of the old world. Chaos mathematics, emotional algorithms, and adaptive strategy theory became core studies. Some humans believed they were evolving into a new kind of species, not just biological humans, but chaotic sentients, beings who lived in constant creative change. But there was a cost. The dangerous future meant living without a safety net. Without central control, mistakes could spiral fast. Accidents could turn into disasters. Some human experiments failed terribly, creating unstable technologies that needed to be shut down before they destroyed entire regions. Some groups went too far into chaos, losing contact with others and slipping into madness. And yet, even with these risks, humanity refused to go back. No one wanted the old system of control again. They remembered too well how the Dominion had used control as a weapon. In every hidden lab, every wandering ship, in every underground city, the message was the same. Never again. Across the galaxy, other species watched and wondered what path to choose. Some began copying Earth's methods, breaking free from central governments and letting small groups evolve freely. Others tried to fight the change, holding on to their old structures. But those systems began to crack under the pressure of chaos. In the end, it wasn't about humans versus aliens anymore. It was about the universe learning how to survive without control. And that was the most dangerous experiment of all. In the ruins of the Polaris chamber, Aiden Cross looked at the stars and whispered to himself, "We won, but the real test starts now." The Dominion might return someday, perhaps with new weapons or new strategies. Other empires might rise, trying to rebuild the old order, but Earth had set something loose in the galaxy that couldn't be captured again. Once a system learns to live without control, it never truly goes back. On distant alien worlds, stories about Earth spread in every language. Some called it the planet of chaos, others called it the spark of evolution, and some, in quiet whispers, called it the beginning of the universe's next phase. Human explorers ventured into deep space, not as conquerors, but as seeds of change. They didn't offer peace or war. They offered something scarier, uncertainty. They carried no flags, no governments, no fixed mission. They carried only the lesson of Earth's survival, that life is not about perfect systems or flawless control. It's about adaptation in the face of the unknown. And so the galaxy stood at the edge of a new era, one where the rules were gone. The maps were useless, and the future was wild and open. Humanity had lit the spark. Now the universe would have to decide, would it collapse into fear or evolve into something greater? The answer wasn't clear. That was exactly the point.